Every insight deserves an audience. Welcome to Atypica AI. The Nile River is dying, and with it, the stability of an entire region. While you've been focused on trade wars and elections, a water war has been brewing in Africa that could reshape global geopolitics. Ethiopia has built a dam so massive it can be seen from space, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, and it's about to fundamentally alter who controls one of the world's most important rivers. My research into transboundary water conflicts reveals something alarming. Traditional diplomacy is systematically favoring upstream countries, and we're watching the emergence of a new form of warfare where water becomes the ultimate weapon. Here's what I discovered that should concern everyone. Climate change isn't just making water scarce, it's creating a systematic transfer of power from downstream to upstream nations. And our current international systems for managing these conflicts are not just inadequate, they're dangerously obsolete. Let me explain why this matters to you. Water conflicts don't stay regional. They trigger refugee crises, economic collapse, and military interventions that draw in global powers. The GERD dispute has already pulled in the United States, European Union, Russia, and China. When 95% of Egypt's water supply depends on a river that Ethiopia now controls, you're looking at potential state collapse. And Egypt has nuclear weapons. The problem runs deeper than just one dam. I analyzed multiple transboundary water disputes worldwide and discovered a pattern that international mediators refuse to acknowledge. Climate change is systematically rewriting the rules of water politics, and upstream countries are winning by default. Traditional water law was built for a stable climate. The 1997 UN Watercourses Convention talks about equitable and reasonable utilization, but what does that mean when the entire water budget is shrinking and unpredictable? When I interviewed water law specialists and climate scientists, they confirmed what the data already shows. Legal frameworks designed for predictable flows become meaningless when you're dealing with extreme droughts followed by catastrophic floods. Here's the critical insight from my research. Climate change acts as a geopolitical accelerant that amplifies existing power imbalances. Upstream countries like Ethiopia can now frame their dams as essential climate adaptation measures, gaining international legitimacy, while downstream countries like Egypt watch their historical water rights become worthless pieces of paper. The numbers tell the story. Ethiopia's GERD can store 74 billion cubic meters of water, nearly twice Egypt's annual water consumption. During filling and operation, Ethiopia gains unprecedented control over the timing and quantity of water reaching Egypt and Sudan. Climate scientists I interviewed project increasingly erratic rainfall patterns for the Nile basin, making this storage capacity even more strategically valuable. But here's what really alarmed me. Every mediation attempt has failed because they're using the wrong framework entirely. The African Union tried, the UN tried. They all approach this as a problem of dividing water volumes. That's fundamentally wrong. My analysis of successful water agreements like the Indus Waters Treaty between India and Pakistan reveals the solution: benefit sharing, not water sharing. The most durable agreements stop fighting over who gets how much water and start collaborating on how to share the benefits that water creates: hydropower, flood control, productivity, regional energy grids. You might think this sounds theoretical, but I interviewed diplomats who've actually brokered these agreements. They're unanimous. The zero-sum mentality of traditional water allocation creates permanent conflict. The positive-sum approach of benefit sharing creates lasting cooperation. Here's what this looks like practically. Instead of Egypt demanding specific water volumes, the agreement should focus on guaranteed electricity access from GERD's hydropower, coordinated flood management that protects all three countries, and joint investment in water-efficient agriculture. Ethiopia gets revenue from power exports, Egypt gets energy security and flood protection, Sudan gets regulated flows and economic development. But there's a deeper structural problem that makes me pessimistic about current mediation efforts. My research identified a fundamental flaw in how international bodies approach these disputes. They ignore power asymmetries. When one country controls the tap and another depends entirely on what flows out, you don't have a negotiation, you have a hostage situation. Climate change is making this worse by systematically strengthening upstream positions. As water becomes more variable and unpredictable, the ability to store and regulate flows becomes exponentially more valuable. Upstream countries are gaining leverage while downstream countries are losing it, and our mediation systems pretend this isn't happening. I discovered something particularly troubling when I analyzed why the GERD negotiations keep failing. Egypt and Sudan keep appealing to international law and historical rights. Ethiopia simply points to the physical reality. They built the dam, they control the water, and climate change makes their infrastructure essential for regional stability. Guess who's winning that argument? This is why I believe we're witnessing the emergence of hydrohegemony as a new form of geopolitical power. Countries that control water sources in a climate-changed world will have unprecedented leverage over their neighbors. And our current diplomatic tools are completely inadequate for managing this shift. The solution requires abandoning everything we think we know about water diplomacy. Based on my research, I'm convinced that effective mediation must do three things. First, establish joint scientific panels that create a single, shared source of truth about water flows and climate projections. Second, design adaptive agreements with built-in mechanisms to adjust to changing conditions. And third, create permanent basin-wide institutions focused on shared prosperity rather than water allocation. Most importantly, international bodies must stop pretending that legal frameworks can overcome physical realities. When upstream countries control the infrastructure and climate change makes that infrastructure more valuable, downstream legal claims become irrelevant unless backed by credible alternatives. Here's my recommendation if you're in a position to influence policy. Support the shift from water sharing to benefit sharing frameworks, demand transparent scientific monitoring systems, and recognize that climate adaptation requires cooperation, not competition. The countries that figure this out first will prosper. Those that cling to historical claims and zero-sum thinking will face increasing instability. The GERD dispute is just the beginning. Climate change is creating similar dynamics in river basins worldwide, the Mekong, the Colorado, the Murray-Darling. The question isn't whether water wars are coming. The question is whether we'll develop new diplomatic tools to manage them or watch our existing systems collapse under pressure they were never designed to handle. Based on everything I've learned, I believe the future belongs to countries that master collaborative water management. Those that don't will discover that in a water-scarce world, geography really is destiny.
Want to learn more about interesting research?
Check out
Atypica AI.